Beyond just being one of my favorites, Neon Genesis Evangelion is one of the most important series in the history of anime. As ridiculous a phrase as it is, if there was ever a savior of anime, Evangelion was it, not only giving the industry a necessary boost during a fierce financial downturn, but also sparking a cultural phenomenon whose impact is still felt now. Beyond just the massive amounts of profit from merchandising, Eva laid the groundwork for much of what we see today, namely the countless Shinji, Asuka, and Rei clones. Pun intended. Yes, not all those influences are a good thing, but it demonstrated the depth anime could achieve with its dense psychological themes and innovative direction. Eva's composition and cinematography is some of the best out there, budgetary limitations and all. Now, important doesn't necessarily mean it's good, so let's continue on. In part 1, we discussed how Hideaki Anno's indelible touch and the intense exploration of human connection in relation to the hedgehog's dilemma, coupled with the deeply flawed and therefore human characters, make Eva stand out as one of the best, in my mind at least. No other character more perfectly embodies this than the show's beloved, yet hated, protagonist, Shinji. Frightened by the intimacy of human contact for fear of rejection, yet wanting nothing more than to be accepted and loved, Shinji's inner paradox lies at the heart of the series, serving as the clearest example of the hedgehog's dilemma. He's everyone's favorite character to either love or hate. Some hate him because he's so real it hurts. Shinji carries the traits of ourselves we're afraid to acknowledge and pushes them into the forefront. For many, his anxiety is all too relatable, making for an uncomfortably personal experience. People often look for gallant heroes in their fiction, ones they can look up to, an escape from reality. In Shinji, Anno gave us a protagonist that's a reflection of ourselves, not the golden image we aspire to be, but what we are, or rather, what we wish to leave behind. Shinji's an amalgam of the parts we hate most about ourselves: weakness, cowardice, fear. With careful direction and writing so perfect it could only have come from someone who's walked Shinji's path, Anno forces the viewer to come to terms with the side of ourselves we want to forget or run away from. If you can't relate to him, you might not like him. If you can, you may find it a bit unnerving, but that's sort of the point. Even so, I believe there's a part of Shinji we all can relate to on a fundamental level. He's presented with this fucked up world full of people hoping to use him for their own ends. He wants nothing more than to be accepted and loved, but in trying to do so, hurts himself and those around him. Still, it's the world he's given, and he ultimately chooses to live with that, finding purpose in life, especially during the most difficult times. Is that not a struggle we can all identify with? Even if you don't like him, you have to respect he's a well-written, well-developed character. He's certainly more nuanced and interesting a protagonist than the generic, overpowered MC trash you see so often today. Many series since have tried to emulate Shinji, leading us to a mountain of shallow clones that failed to capture that effect. What makes Shinji work as a protagonist isn't his weak, occasionally whiny personality, or the fact that he has deep-rooted psychological issues. Shinji works because he's real, and to struggle to fight through those issues feels like an uncomfortably authentic expression of an actual person's, not just an anime character's. In Evangelion, Anno made people, and there's no clearer example of that than Shinji. Just look at what we know of Shinji prior to the series. He watched his mother die when he was young, a tragedy Yui wanted him to see in her effort to achieve immortality and serve as an eternal mark of humanity's existence. His father neglected him his entire life, sending him away to go live with his grade school teacher. He has no friends, unable to make genuine connections with people. Add it all up and it's easy to see where his psychological issues come from. Much like Asuka and Misato, Shinji has a desperate desire to feel needed, to the point where he'll do almost anything he's told if it'll make people like him. It's why he gets in the Eva. It's why he kills Kaoru, the only person to ever make him feel loved. Hell, it's even why he plays the cello. Shinji does what he's told out of a dependence on others' approval. No matter how many times he tries, he can't run away because he doesn't want to be forgotten, abandoned, or unneeded. He constantly tears himself down, a sign he likely suffers from avoidant personality disorder. While he wants attention from others, he can't return it to them, a fact Asuka points out multiple times. He doesn't think a worthless, weak person like him can help them. This is a common thread throughout Eva. The characters are far too wrapped up in their own issues to notice those around them. Shinji doesn't think a worthless, weak person like him can help them. Every time he does try to get involved, he only causes more pain for both parties. It's not that he doesn't care about them, however. He refuses to attack Toji in the fight with the Angel, though Gendo forces him to anyway. He begs to help Asuka in the fight with Ariel in episode 23. The hedgehog's dilemma is really what drives Shinji. He fails to make connections with others out of his fear of hurting both himself and them. As Kaoru says in episode 24, it's true that no one will feel pain if he doesn't get close with them.
他人を知らなければ裏切られることも、互いに傷つくこともない。でも、寂しさを忘れることもないよ。人間は寂しさを永久になくすことはできない。人は一人だからね。 ただ忘れることができるから人は生きてゆけるのさ。
He uses a music player to block off the outside world and escape reality, a diversion that really goes two ways. On the one hand, he can shut himself off from people, and on the other, he isn't trapped within his mind. By replaying the music with his headphones, he detaches himself from others and his own thoughts. The train serves as a perfect representation of Shinji's struggle. On a train, you're both surrounded by people and isolated at the same time, much like the hedgehog's dilemma and Shinji's own mental state. It's why the train isn't just a one-off piece of nice symbolism, but rather the very place he's constantly confronted with his issues, the red palette illustrating how this is Shinji's own personal hell inside his mind. Shinji tries his best to run away from the pain of reality, living off the few moments of happiness in his life, whether it's when Misato told him he was number one, or Gendo actually giving him some praise. These brief highs prove just as toxic as the lows, however, giving him a false sense of bravado that almost kills him in the fight against Liliel. Shinji can try to hide behind the false happiness others occasionally give him all he wants, but until he decides to face reality and accept himself, he'll never find true happiness. Ultimately, Shinji makes the bravest choice of all. He chooses to live. Given the opportunity to make the wish of a world without the boundaries of the individual soul come true, Shinji rejects it with the hope that maybe someday he can learn to love himself. Maybe he will find happiness. Maybe. Shinji chooses to live in spite of the pain and suffering inherent to humanity. He learns to accept himself with the hope that one day he might be able to love himself and in turn, love others. That's just it. He has hope. Shinji's final realization is the primary reason episodes 25 and 26 are two of my favorite episodes in the entire series, bringing us to the final reason why I love Evangelion. The ending. Eva's ending is what finally brings it all together, giving each major character a meaningful send-off and firmly establishing its core message. The end of the TV series takes a lot of heat for its, well, complete lack of any narrative structure, but this is easily forgivable thanks to the existence of End of Evangelion. The common belief is that after Anno took the series in a more disturbing, violent direction in the latter half of the series, they suffered severe budget cuts and were forced to eschew the planned ending for a more minimalist style filled with stills, text screen, and little to no external action. It's why some scenes towards the end see agonizing extended fixed images. Anyone still watching the series for the plot at this point is sure to be disappointed, but the final two episodes take an introspective approach, pushing the character issues into the forefront, which we've already discussed ad nauseum, so I won't repeat myself here. Episodes 25 and 26 take place in the characters' minds just before and during instrumentality, making End of Eva not so much an alternate ending, but rather a complementary one. It's pretty clear End of Eva was Anno's initial plan from some of the shots scattered throughout these final two episodes. As much as I loved the introspection and ultimate conclusion to Shinji's character arc, End of TV still leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Thankfully, End of Eva comes in to fill that void, essentially showing the events leading up to and directly following the end of the TV series. Where End of TV gives Shinji a satisfying finish, End of Eva concludes each of the other major character story arcs in some meaningful way. Misato finally sees fulfillment in her role as Shinji's guardian, keeping him alive just long enough to get to Unit 1 as Seal caves in all around them. Shinji at this point is completely helpless, fully content to die. Misato literally has to drag him along in an effort to protect him. After getting shot, Misato, knowing she can't let Shinji see her die, does everything she can to snap him out of it, leaving him with one last critical piece of advice. Eventually, she resorts to the one thing she thinks everyone wants: sex. Kissing him and telling him they'll finish when he gets back, knowing full well she's dying, before pushing him into the elevator. Despite all her failures to Asuka and Shinji throughout the series, Misato finally comes through for both of them in the end. Rei makes the choice to act of her own free will, betraying Gendo in favor of Shinji, making him the arbiter of instrumentality instead. Rei's story arc revolved around her sense of identity, and in this moment she decides she isn't Gendo's puppet, ruins all of his plans, and leaves him with a big fuck you before fusing with Lilith and initiating instrumentality, where she guides humanity, and Shinji, to understanding and the ultimate decision. Gendo, meanwhile, sees the error in his ways as Yui, Kaoru, and Rei appear before him. In one fell swoop, Gendo goes from mysterious asshole to suddenly complex, maybe even sympathetic asshole. Rei does nothing but stare blankly, realizing how far beneath her he really is. Unfortunately for him, the realization of his errors is too little too late, and so in his last moment, all he can do is beg forgiveness. Asuka, surprised to find herself alive, feels content to die much like Shinji. She's lost any semblance of self-worth at this point, believing no one will look at her now and give her the validation she so desperately craves. She finally comes to the realization, however, that her mother is always watching over her in Unit 2. She sees that the AT field is the wall which separates a person from others, making her understand she never needed validation to begin with. She doesn't need anyone but herself. This happiness is short-lived as the mass production Evas team together to thoroughly annihilate her with fittingly sexual symbolism, a humiliation reminiscent to her fight against Ariel. Instrumentality is the return to one, the loss of individuality. For Asuka, still desperate for isolation at this point, there couldn't be a worse fate. Ultimately, though, it comes down to Shinji's journey through instrumentality and finally learning to love himself. As the fun's just getting started, we see an exchange between Shinji and Asuka with nothing but sexualized shots of Asuka as she calls him out on his bullshit. The shots emphasize Shinji's complete inability to understand her, reducing her to a flat projection he can actually handle. Asuka, on the other hand, has already come to love herself, but she can at least understand what he's going through. Shinji's fears again come pouring out. The following scene is a clear callback to both the kiss scene, Shinji and Asuka are wearing the same clothes, and the scene where Shinji tells Asuka Kaji's dead. Just look at the fallen coffee pot in each. Shinji offers Asuka his help, but she doesn't want or need him anymore. On top of that, he really just wanted her to help him. Asuka calls him out on it. He doesn't need Asuka, he needs somebody, anybody. Asuka wants to be an individual, so being Shinji's last option is a slap to the face, leading to this confrontation. Shinji, completely past his breaking point and wanting nothing more than to break down the walls of the individual, strangles Asuka, the symbol of desire for isolation in Eva. In effect, kickstarting instrumentality and the Kamsuser Todd sequence. I could go on and on about the instrumentality sequence and its close connection to Kabbalah, but then this video might never end. Instead, let's move forward. Shinji realizes this world where no one exists is nothing but a fantasy, an escape from the pain of reality, finally understanding connection is a necessary part of life. It's the combination of those fears, anxieties, and pain which make us human. Maybe people will one day understand and love each other. Maybe they won't. Even if he never sees an end to the pain, Shinji decides it's okay because those feelings were real. Thus ending instrumentality and bringing about a dramatic, ultimately happy conclusion to the series. So anyone can return from instrumentality so long as they have the will to return. What an optimistic message. No matter how deep your despair runs, no matter how much you run away, anywhere can be heaven as long as you have the will to live and make it so. That doesn't just happen, but it's ultimately about having hope. Shinji learns to finally accept himself for who he is. Naturally, he was the first person to rematerialize, but it makes sense Asuka was next as she represents the desire for individuality. Of course she would want to escape instrumentality. When he comes to, Shinji chokes her again out of fear he's still in instrumentality, essentially picking up where he left off before it all began. Asuka then gently touches his face, indicating she can feel both his pain and her own. Shinji realizes instrumentality's over and stops choking her, finally understanding her pain. He's now come to a similar place of self-acceptance as Asuka. With that, maybe he can make connection. Shinji's finally gained the strength to stop choking her. He breaks down out of both relief and guilt before Asuka mutters the infamous line which has garnered more speculation than the Zapruder film. As most of you probably know by this point, Kimochi Wadari can mean how disgusting or I feel sick, terrible, depending on context. In this case, I don't think there is a right translation, but to understand it, we don't need one. I believe it's Asuka lamenting how she finally escaped the personal hell of instrumentality, only to find none other than Shinji on top of her, her isolation denied by the last person she wants to see. At the same time, she's disgusted with the sad state of existence both she, Shinji, and humanity finds themselves in. Regardless of what I have to say, believe whatever interpretation you want to believe, even if it's the pregnancy theory Anno himself debunked. Don't let anyone devalue your interpretation. Hell, that sort of ties into what Eva's all about, coming to your own understanding of yourself and choosing to live with it. I'll leave you with one last quote from Anno himself in regards to the meaning behind the series. Evangelion is like a puzzle, you know. Any person can see it and give his or her own answer. In other words, we're offering viewers to think by themselves, so that each person can imagine his or her own world. We will never offer the answers, even in the theatrical version. As for many Evangelion viewers, they may expect us to provide the All About Eva manuals, but there is no such thing. Don't expect to get answers by someone. Don't expect to be catered to all the time. We all have to find our own answers. Eva is about learning to love yourself, accepting life for what it is, and having the will to carry on. The hope that maybe one day you'll find happiness. Even if you never do, as long as you have that hope, you can live. In the end, I guess Eva's problems just don't bother me very much. The themes and meaning resonated in a way that's much more important to me personally than the convoluted plot. For many of you, that simply isn't the case, which is fine. You are, after all, entitled to your own opinion. even if you are wrong.